The morning Gideon Harlow's wall came down, the sound echoed across 3 properties. A crack, then a groan, then the slow, catastrophic thunder of 14,000 pounds of poured concrete and imported Italian stone collapsing into the earth that was never, not for a single day, his to build on. Harlow stood on his driveway in a silk bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, and watched federal marshals and county deputies methodically tear apart 340 feet of wall he had spent $280,000 constructing. And across the fence line, on his back porch, in a weathered wooden rocking chair that had survived 40 years of Missouri winters, sat Staff Sergeant Raymond Earl Dupree, United States Army, retired. He was drinking black coffee from a thermos. He was not watching. He was reading the newspaper. He had known this morning was coming for 2 years. He had been patient. Let me tell you about Clover Hill Road. It sits in the eastern edge of Stone County, Missouri, about 11 miles outside of Branson, where the Ozark Hills flatten into long, quiet meadows and the summers smell like honeysuckle and creek mud. In the spring of 2019, before any of this happened, Clover Hill Road was the kind of street that real estate agents call established and neighbors call perfect. 14 homes, big lots, most of them an acre or more. Older houses, well kept, with wide porches and garden beds and American flags that barely moved in the still summer air. The Hendersons at the far end had a trampoline. The Patels next door to them kept chickens. Somebody, every Saturday morning around 8 a.m., was always mowing something. The street didn't have an HOA, didn't need one. The neighbors knew each other. They watched each other's houses. They brought casseroles when someone had surgery and waved when someone pulled in late from a long day. It was, in the truest sense of the word, a neighborhood. And then, in June of 2019, on the lot at the very end of the cul-de-sac, the biggest lot on the street, just over 4 acres, a moving truck arrived. Then another one. Then a pearl white 2021 Tesla Model X and a gunmetal gray Porsche Cayenne. And everything changed. But first, let me tell you about Raymond. Staff Sergeant First Class Raymond Earl Dupree, born 1952 in Joplin, Missouri. Enlisted in the United States Army in August of 1970 at the age of 18 because his older brother had gone the year before and Raymond wasn't the kind of man who let someone else carry a weight he could share. He served 2 tours in Vietnam, then West Germany during the Cold War, then Fort Bragg, then the Gulf War in 1991, where he served as a reconnaissance specialist with the 101st Airborne Division in Operation Desert Storm. He retired in 1998 after 28 years of service, having earned the Bronze Star, 2 Army Commendation Medals, and a combat infantryman badge he kept in a shadow box his late wife, Darlene, had helped him mount. After retirement, Raymond came home to Stone County. Not because he had to, he could have settled anywhere. But this was his ground. His father had farmed this land. His grandfather had cleared it. The house at 14 Clover Hill Road, a 4-bedroom, slate-gray farmhouse with a wraparound porch, had been in his family since 1953. Raymond lived there alone. Darlene had passed in 2015 from pancreatic cancer. Their 2 children, Marcus and Sonia, lived in Kansas City and Atlanta, respectively. They called on Sundays. They visited on holidays. The house was quiet in a way that only houses know how to be quiet when someone beloved is gone from them. But Raymond was not a sad man, not in any obvious way. He kept a vegetable garden on the south side of the house, tomatoes, okra, sweet peppers. He built furniture in his workshop on weekends, chairs mostly, which he sold at the Branson Craft Market. He walked every morning at 6 a.m. with a 3-year-old Bluedick coonhound named Walter down Clover Hill Road and back, stopping sometimes to talk with whoever was out. He was the man you called when you needed to know where the property line was. He was the man who showed up quietly when a neighbor's tree fell in a storm. He was the kind of man who never raised his voice because he'd learned a long time ago that the loudest people in any room are usually the ones with the least to say. He had one wound he didn't talk about, not from combat, though there were those too. This one was simpler. He missed Darlene with a ferocity that never fully dulled. Her rose bushes were still along the east fence line. He tended them every spring. He didn't know why. Maybe he did know why, he just didn't say it out loud. Raymond Earl Dupree was 67 years old. He had seen jungles and deserts and the cold inside of a bunker at 2 in the morning. He had lost men he loved. He had watched countries burn. He was not afraid of anything on Clover Hill Road. His name was Gideon Harlow. 38 years old, co-founder of a San Francisco-based data analytics startup called Prism Metrics that had sold to a private equity firm in 2018 and this was in the local Branson Tribune when he moved in somewhere in the neighborhood of $47 million. Harlow had grown up in Scottsdale, Arizona, the son of a commercial real estate developer. He'd graduated from USC with a degree in computer science, done 2 years in the Bay Area startup ecosystem, and by 30 was the kind of man who described himself on LinkedIn as a builder, disruptor, and serial entrepreneur. He had 34,000 followers. He posted photos of his meals. He once wrote a viral thread about the death of small-town mediocrity and how he planned to bring real culture and real money to forgotten corners of America. He bought the property at 16 Clover Hill Road for $890,000 in March of 2019. Cash deal. He'd been attracted to the 4 acres, the view of the tree line, and according to what he told the real estate agent, the idea of building something visionary in a place where people didn't dream big enough. The moving trucks arrived on a Thursday in June. 2 of them, plus a flatbed carrying what turned out to be a commissioned sculpture, an abstract steel and bronze piece, maybe 8 feet tall, that workers spent the better part of 2 days positioning in the front yard. The first words Gideon Harlow ever said to Raymond Dupree came on that second day, when Raymond walked Walter past the property line on his morning walk and paused to watch the sculpture being unloaded. Harlow appeared at the edge of his driveway, expensive sneakers, a slim-fit polo, aviator sunglasses despite the overcast sky. "You live around here," he said not warmly. Raymond nodded. "Next door, Raymond Dupree. Welcome to the neighborhood." Harlow glanced at the coonhound, then at Raymond's house, then back at Raymond. "Cool," he said. "Hey, does anyone on this street have a landscaping service they use? I'm going to need someone who actually knows what they're doing." He went back inside before Raymond could answer. Walter looked up at Raymond. Raymond looked at Walter. They finished their walk. It took Gideon Harlow exactly 3 weeks to become a problem. The first sign was the construction, not renovation, Harlow was adding on: a pool, a 3-car garage, a guest house. Contractors arrived every morning at 6:30 a.m., sometimes 6:15, with trucks and heavy equipment that rumbled the ground and made Walter bark from inside the house. Raymond didn't complain. Construction was legal, inconvenient but legal. The second sign was the survey stakes. On a humid Thursday morning in mid-July 2019, Raymond was in his garden when he noticed 2 men in orange vests moving along the fence line between his property and Harlow's. They were pulling up the old wooden fence posts, the ones Raymond's father had set in 1971, and replacing them with bright orange survey flags. Raymond walked over, calm and easy, the way he walked everywhere. "Morning," he said. "What are you fellas working on?" The older of the 2 surveyors, a tired-looking man in his 50s, glanced up. "Survey work for Mr. Harlow. He's putting up a retaining wall and wants to know the line." Raymond nodded. "Who commissioned the survey?" "Mr. Harlow's architect. We're just measuring to his specs." "To his specs," Raymond repeated, "or to the legal property line?" The surveyor hesitated. "We're working off the county records." Raymond thanked them and went inside. He pulled out a folded paper from the fireproof safe in his bedroom closet. It was a property deed and survey certificate, executed in September of 1971, signed by a licensed surveyor named William T. Graff. It described the eastern boundary of the Dupree property, 14 Clover Hill Road, in legal meets and bounds with iron pins and precise measurements, extending the line 3.4 feet further east than where the old wooden fence posts had been sitting. The fence, as it turned out, had always been set slightly inside the Dupree property line. A convenience, not a legal boundary. The Duprees had never needed to enforce it. Nobody had ever pushed it. Raymond placed the 1971 document back in the safe. He noted the date in a small green notebook he kept on his kitchen counter. He went back to his garden. "Now let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever tried to be reasonable with someone who has absolutely no interest in being reasonable? Someone who mistakes your kindness for weakness and your patience for ignorance? Drop a comment right now and tell me about a time you tried to handle something the right way and got walked all over for it. because Raymond was about to find out exactly what that feels like. 2 weeks later, Harlow knocked on Raymond's door. This was a surprise. He'd never initiated contact before. Raymond opened the door. Harlow smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Hey, so my architect finalized the wall design. It's going to run along the property line between our parcels. Full height, privacy screen. It's going to look incredible, honestly, kind of a Napa Valley aesthetic." Raymond looked at him steadily. "Where exactly is it going?" "Right along the fence line." "The fence line," Raymond said, "or the property line?" Harlow blinked. "Same thing." "They're not the same thing," Raymond said. "I'd like to see your survey before you break ground." Harlow's smile thinned. "I don't really need your approval to build on my property." "No," Raymond agreed, "you don't, but you need a surveyor who's reading the right documents. I'd like to compare surveys before you pour concrete." Harlow stared at him, then he said, "And this is important, remember this. Listen, old-timer, this isn't your little farm anymore. People with real money are moving into this area. Just let the professionals handle it." He left. Raymond closed the door. He walked to the kitchen. He picked up the green notebook. He wrote down the date, the time, and the exact words Gideon Harlow had just said. Ground broke on the wall in September of 2019. It was, Raymond had to admit, an impressive structure. Poured concrete footings. A 6-foot-high framework of reinforced block and mortar faced on Harlow's side with Italian travertine stone. 14,000 pounds of material on a 340-foot run. It was also sitting, by Raymond's calculation, between 2.1 and 3.4 feet inside the Dupree property line. He hired a licensed surveyor of his own, a woman named Patricia Oakes out of Springfield, who had been doing boundary surveys in Stone County for 22 years. She came on a cold morning in October with her equipment and her assistant, and they spent 4 hours measuring, cross-referencing the 1971 graph survey, locating the original iron survey pins, which were still in the ground barely beneath decades of soil, and producing a certified report. Her conclusion: the wall, as constructed, encroached upon the property of Raymond Earl Dupree by an average of 2.7 feet along its full length, with a maximum encroachment of 3.4 feet at the northwest corner. Raymond thanked her, paid her invoice, and put the report in the fireproof safe alongside the 1971 document. Then he wrote a certified letter to Gideon Harlow, polite, factual, attached Patricia Oakes' survey, requested that Harlow halt construction and meet to discuss the boundary discrepancy. Harlow never responded. The wall kept going up. And then the other incidents started. In November of 2019, Raymond came outside to find that his mailbox, a solid cast iron post his father had set in 1968, had been struck and knocked sideways. Fresh tire marks in the grass. No note. He took photographs. He wrote it in the green notebook. In December, a contractor truck belonging to Harlow's construction crew blocked Raymond's driveway from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. on a Wednesday, preventing him from getting to a doctor's appointment. When Raymond knocked on Harlow's door, Harlow told him through an intercom, he'd had a video intercom installed by then, to call the crew directly and cut the connection. In February of 2020, Walter stopped eating for 3 days. The vet in Branson found traces of a chemical in his bloodstream consistent with a rodenticide, not enough to be life-threatening but enough to cause severe gastric distress. Raymond walked his property line. He found a small mound of blue-green pellets scattered just inside his fence line, near the area where Walter liked to sniff along the east border. He bagged the pellets, he took them to the vet, he had them tested, he took photographs of where he found them. He wrote it in the green notebook. He did not knock on Harlow's door. He called the Stone County Sheriff's Office instead, filed a report. The deputy came out, looked at the photos, looked at Raymond's documentation, and said he'd note it, but that without direct evidence of who placed the pellets, it was difficult to proceed. Raymond thanked him. He did not raise his voice. He put the incident report number in the green notebook. By March of 2020, the wall was complete. 340 feet of travertine-faced concrete, sitting on Raymond Dupree's land, cutting off the natural light to Darlene's rose bushes along the eastern fence. The roses were dying. By May of 2020, the wall had cut off enough afternoon light that 3 of the 7 rose bushes Darlene had planted in the spring of 2012, a variety called Mr. Lincoln, deep red, her favorite, had gone spindly and weak. By June, 2 of them were gone. Raymond transplanted the survivors to the south side of the house. He didn't say anything about it to anyone. He just did it quietly one morning before the heat settled in, kneeling in the dirt with a trowel and an ache in his hands that wasn't entirely from the work. But the roses were not the breaking point. The breaking point was a Tuesday in July of 2020. A gray, still afternoon, the kind where the air barely moves and sound carries funny. Raymond was in his workshop when he heard it, a sound like something snapping, then silence. He came out to find that the section of old wooden fence on the west side of his property, the side that faced the road, the side that had stood since his father built it, had been knocked down. Not by weather. The posts were snapped at the base, clean, in a pattern consistent with a vehicle impact. A fresh tire tread was pressed into the soft soil beside the fallen posts. Raymond stood there for a moment. He looked at the tire tread, he looked at the broken posts. He looked at his father's fence lying in the summer grass. He went inside, he got his camera, a dedicated digital camera, not his phone, which he'd purchased specifically for documentation. He took 43 photographs. He walked back to his workshop. He picked up the phone and called his oldest friend. His name was Colonel Marcus Webb, United States Army JAG Corps, retired. They'd served together in the Gulf. Webb had left the Army in 2002, gone to law school on the GI Bill, and was now a senior partner at a firm in St. Louis that handled federal civil litigation and property law. Raymond told Marcus everything, from the beginning: the survey discrepancy, the certified letter, the wall going up, Walter's poisoning, the mailbox, the fence. There was a long silence on Marcus's end. Then Marcus said, "Ray, do you still have the 1971 survey?" "It's in the safe," Raymond said. "Don't let it out of your sight," Marcus said. "I'm coming down next weekend. Don't say a word to the neighbor. Don't send any more letters, just keep documenting." If you think Raymond was going to let any of this go, you've never met a man like Raymond Dupree. And here's what nobody knew at the time. Not Gideon Harlow, not the contractors, not anyone on Clover Hill Road except Raymond himself. The firebox safe in that bedroom closet held a great deal more than just a deed and a survey. Marcus Webb arrived on a Saturday in August of 2020. He drove a dark blue 2018 Ford F-150 and wore civilian clothes, jeans, a plain shirt, but he carried himself the way military men always do, even when they're trying not to. Raymond made coffee. They sat at the kitchen table. Raymond opened the safe. Here's what was inside. The 1971 survey by William T. Graff, certified and notarized with the original county recorder's stamp. Patricia Oak's 2019 certified encroachment survey. Every certified letter Raymond had sent to Harlow, with return receipts. 27 months of security camera footage from a 4-camera HD system Raymond had installed in October of 2019, including footage of Harlow's contractor truck blocking the driveway, footage of an unidentified person near the east fence line in the area where the rodenticide pellets were found, and footage of a vehicle, later confirmed to be a 2019 Cadillac Escalade, registered to a company called Prism Holdings LLC, which listed Gideon Harlow as its sole managing member, making contact with the western fence posts on that gray Tuesday in July. The vehicle, Harlow's business vehicle, on camera, hitting the fence. Marcus Webb looked at the footage 3 times. Then he looked at Raymond. "Ray," he said, "you've been building a case." "I've been keeping records," Raymond said. "That's what I said." Marcus spent the rest of the weekend reviewing documents. He made calls, quiet ones, to colleagues and county officials and a contact at the Missouri Attorney General's office he'd worked with on a federal encroachment case 2 years prior. He also found something else. Prism Holdings LLC, the shell company registered to Harlow, had been flagged in a 2019 federal disclosure filing related to tax shelter investigation. The SEC had opened a preliminary inquiry. Nothing public yet, nothing criminal yet. but the inquiry existed and Harlow's assets, including the Clover Hill Road property, were theoretically subject to examination. None of this was Raymond's primary concern. His primary concern was the wall. Marcus filed suit in Stone County Circuit Court in September of 2020 on Raymond's behalf. The claim was straightforward: adverse encroachment, trespass to land, property damage, and, based on the certified letter, Harlow had never responded to willful encroachment with constructive notice. The lawsuit asked for the wall's removal, restoration of the property to its prior condition, and damages. Total claimed $312,000. Harlow's attorney, a Kansas City firm called Drexler and Whitmore, filed a response in October dismissing the 1971 survey as outdated and superseded by subsequent county improvements, argued that the fence line had established a de facto boundary through long use and acquiescence, and suggested Raymond's claims were those of a confused elderly man with a grievance against progress. Marcus Webb read that response at his desk in St. Louis. He called Raymond. "They called you confused," Marcus said. "I heard," Raymond said. "How do you feel about that?" "I feel like going back to my workshop," Raymond said. "You handle it." Marcus smiled and went to work. "Now let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever watched a man who's spent his entire life being underestimated finally collect? Because this next part is what the whole story's been building toward." The case came to hearing before Stone County Circuit Court Judge Constance Ellerby in February of 2021. The night before the hearing, a cold front moved through the Ozarks. The temperature dropped to 19 degrees. The morning of February 11, 2021 was clear and pale blue, the kind of cold that makes sound ring like a bell. The highway into Branson was lightly iced. The courthouse on Main Street, a solid brick building from 1927, had its lights on early. Raymond drove himself. Marcus met him in the parking lot. They walked in together. Drexler and Whitmore had sent 2 attorneys and a paralegal. They carried a banker's box full of materials and carried themselves with the particular confidence of people who bill $500 an hour and expect the world to know it. They had not, it turned out, adequately studied the 1971 survey. The hearing lasted 2 days. On the first day, Harlow's attorneys presented their argument about de facto boundary establishment, the idea that the old wooden fence line, having existed for decades without dispute, had become the legal boundary through what Missouri law calls acquiescence. It was a real legal theory, and under ordinary circumstances, it might have held some weight. What it didn't account for was William T. Graff. William T. Graff had passed away in 1994. But in 1971, when he conducted the Dupree boundary survey, he had done something meticulous surveyors do when they want their work to last. He had driven iron survey pins, 3 4-inch steel rods, 24 inches long, into the ground at every corner and interval marker of the property line. Patricia Oakes had located 3 of those pins in her 2019 survey, still in the ground, still in place. On the second day, Marcus called Patricia Oakes to the stand. She brought her equipment certifications, her 2019 survey report, and photographs of all 3 iron pins in situ. She walked the court through the meets and bounds description in the 1971 document. She explained in patient, clear language that the survey pins constituted unambiguous physical evidence of the legally recorded property boundary. She explained that the fence had always sat inside the Dupree line, a common informal accommodation, and that Harlow's wall had been constructed beyond even the old fence line, deeper into Dupree property. Harlow's attorney cross-examined her for an hour. She did not waver. The second Chekhov's gun went off quietly at the end of the second day. Marcus submitted the security camera footage as exhibits. The footage of Harlow's company vehicle, the 2019 Cadillac Escalade registered to Prism Holdings LLC, making contact with Raymond's western fence posts. Harlow's attorney objected to relevance. Judge Ellerby overruled the objection. The footage ran. Gideon Harlow, sitting at the defendant's table in a $3,000 suit, went very still. Judge Ellerby issued her ruling 6 days later, on February 17, 2021. She found that the 1971 Graff survey, corroborated by the physical evidence of the iron survey pins, established the legal boundary of the Dupree property. She found that Harlow's wall constituted a willful encroachment upon that property, particularly given that Harlow had received Raymond's certified letter with the oak survey attached before construction was complete and had chosen to proceed regardless. She ordered the wall removed at Harlow's expense within 90 days. She awarded Raymond Dupree compensatory damages of $218,400 for property damage, loss of use, and documented losses including the cost of the counter-survey, the veterinary bills for Walter, the replacement of the fence posts, and 2 years of diminished property value along the affected line. She awarded an additional $140,000 in punitive damages based on the willful nature of the encroachment and what she described, in her written opinion, as a pattern of contemptuous disregard for the legal rights of an adjoining landowner. Total award $358,400 plus legal fees. Drexler and Whitmore's bill for the losing side came to approximately $94,000. The total financial cost to Gideon Harlow of building a wall on someone else's land, just over $730,000. Not counting the wall itself, which had cost him $280,000 to build. You see, folks, arrogance is expensive. The demolition crew arrived on a Monday morning in April of 2021. It was a mild day, mid-50s, light clouds, the smell of fresh earth and something blooming. A court order rode in the lead truck. The county sheriff sent a deputy to observe. 3 other vehicles, a structural demolition contractor out of Springfield, a waste hauler, and a small flatbed for the travertine stone, which was being cataloged and removed as a separate line item in the damages accounting. Gideon Harlow did not come outside. His Porsche was in the driveway, his Tesla was gone. The lights in the house were off on the demolition side. Raymond's neighbor on the other side, a retired schoolteacher named Vera Hutchins, came out and stood on her porch and watched without saying anything. Raymond made coffee. He took his thermos to the back porch. He sat in his rocking chair. He opened that morning's Branson Tribune. The demolition took 2 days. The concrete had to be broken in sections, the footings jackhammered out, the travertine stone carefully removed and stacked. On the second afternoon, a crew came in to grade the disturbed earth along the property line, replacing the soil that had been excavated during the original construction. When they were done, there was a strip of raw earth along the east side of Raymond's property, 340 feet, 2 to 3 feet wide, pale brown against the spring grass. It looked like a scar in the ground where something had been taken out. Other neighbors had come and gone throughout the 2 days. Some stood and watched, some nodded at Raymond. None of them said anything about it that needed to be said. The foreman of the demolition crew rang Raymond's doorbell on the afternoon of the second day. "All done, Mr. Dupree," he said. "Thank you," Raymond said. "You want us to reseed that strip along the fence?" Raymond looked past him at the raw earth. "No," he said, "I'll take care of it." He closed the door. Gideon Harlow listed the property at 16 Clover Hill Road for sale in August of 2021. The asking price was $795,000, $95,000 less than he'd paid for it 2 years earlier, before the pool, the garage, the guest house, and the demolished wall. It sat on the market for 5 months. It sold in January of 2022 for $710,000. By then, the SEC inquiry into Prism Holdings LLC had escalated. In March of 2022, federal prosecutors filed civil fraud charges related to the company's 2018 sale, specifically allegations that certain financial representations made to the acquiring private equity firm had been materially misleading. The case was civil, not criminal, but the financial exposure was significant. The last public record of the matter, available through court filings, showed a settlement negotiation in progress, with Harlow's net worth reportedly reduced to a fraction of what it had been at the peak. His LinkedIn went quiet, then dark. The marriage, Raymond hadn't known he was married, the wife had never appeared on Clover Hill Road, ended in divorce filings in St. Louis County in the fall of 2022. None of this was Raymond's doing. He hadn't made any calls. He hadn't filed any tips. Some men plant their own destruction so carefully that all anyone else has to do is wait. In the spring of 2022, a couple bought the property at 16 Clover Hill Road. Their names were Daniel and Patricia Sousa. He was a retired fire captain from Tulsa. She was a pediatric nurse. They had 2 teenage sons who played basketball in the driveway on weekend mornings. On the day they moved in, Patricia Sousa knocked on Raymond's door with a plate of homemade empanadas. Raymond opened the door. He looked at her and at the plate and at her husband standing at the edge of the driveway with his hands in his pockets. "Welcome to the neighborhood," Raymond said. "We heard a little about you from the real estate agent," Patricia said with a smile. "She said you were someone good to know." Raymond held the door open wider. "Come in," he said. "I'll make coffee." "And what about the strip of raw earth along the east fence line?" By the summer of 2022, Raymond had seeded it, mixed the soil with compost and slow-release fertilizer the way his wife Darlene had taught him. He planted grass along most of it. Along the section closest to the house, where the afternoon light now came in clean and unobstructed, he planted roses. Mr. Lincoln variety, deep red, Darlene's favorite. By the following spring, they were blooming. You know, people ask me sometimes why these stories matter, why they keep watching, why a story about a neighbor dispute in the Missouri Ozarks can put 10 million people on the edge of their seats. I think it's because we're all looking for the same thing. We're looking for proof that patience is not weakness, that dignity is not passivity, that the quiet man sitting on his porch, drinking his coffee, keeping his notebook, he isn't losing, he's waiting. And there is a profound difference. Raymond Dupree didn't win because he was angry. He didn't win because he was loud or aggressive or threatening. He won because for 50 years his family had done things right. His father drove iron pins into the earth in 1971. Raymond kept a piece of paper in a fireproof safe for 30 years without knowing why. And when the time came, he was ready. Gideon Harlow came into that neighborhood with $47 million in his pocket and something in his chest that money doesn't fix, the belief that the world was arranged for his benefit, that the rules were for other people, that an old man on a porch with a coonhound and a vegetable garden was beneath his concern. He was wrong. He was expensively, catastrophically, permanently wrong. And Raymond just planted roses. There's a thing they teach you early in military service, not in any manual, not in any classroom. You pick it up somewhere between the first deployment and the last one. It goes like this. Never mistake a quiet man for a weak man. Never mistake patience for permission. And never, ever build a wall on land that isn't yours and expect the man who owns it to forget. Because some men have been keeping records their whole lives. And some documents last longer than empires. If this story meant something to you today, leave a comment. Tell me about a time someone underestimated you. Tell me about the neighbor you've never forgotten. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, share it with them. We'll see you on the next one. This story is inspired by real events and public court records. Names, locations, and specific details have been changed or dramatized for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental.